She didn't say a word when they laughed. A small, quiet figure, just a woman, wrapped in a towel, surrounded by mockery. They mocked her in the showers, called her soft, said she didn't belong. What they didn't know, she was a female Navy SEAL commander, trained to lead warriors into battle, and in under 60 seconds, the room fell silent because they realized they'd just humiliated the wrong woman, an underestimated woman who would soon teach them the true meaning of leadership. Welcome to True Kind Stories. Before we begin, drop a comment with where you're watching from. And if you believe true leadership doesn't need to shout, hit that subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss this one. No one noticed her when she walked in. Not really. Just a small woman with a towel wrapped tightly around her frame, quiet eyes, and shoulders that had carried more weight than any man in that room would ever understand. Avery Blake, that was her name. She had arrived at Camp Iron Ridge 3 days prior, barely a whisper on the manifest. No fanfare, no salute. And now she was standing in the middle of the male showers. 6 trainees turned to look, and then to laugh. What's this? Did we get a new yoga instructor? Better check if the women's locker room got flooded. They howled, nudging each other, puffing their chests, loud and proud. Avery didn't respond. She didn't blink. She just stood still, water dripping from her hair, jaw set, eyes locked on the exit. But then, the speaker above crackled to life. Attention, all personnel. Lieutenant Commander Avery Blake, report to Command Briefing Room Alpha. SEAL Team 9 is awaiting final orders. The room went dead silent. Avery turned, met every stunned face, then walked out. Because the woman they just mocked, she wasn't just another trainee. She was the commander they'd soon be begging to follow. No one moved for a full 10 seconds after the announcement. The men in the showers, seconds ago drowning in their own arrogance, now stood frozen like statues carved out of shame. One by one, they lowered their eyes, pretending to busy themselves with towels, boots, anything to escape the reality that had just slapped them across the face. Avery Blake had already disappeared down the hallway, her strides calm, precise. She didn't need to look back. She'd seen that look before, that stunned, breathless silence from men who thought leadership had a specific shape, voice, or gender. They were always wrong. By the time she reached the operations deck, her uniform was on, wet hair slicked back in a tight braid, face composed but alert. A digital panel recognized her clearance and the heavy doors hissed open. Inside the briefing room stood a full squad of elite trainees, all waiting for their commander. Maps flickered across the main screen. Simulated mission objectives glowed red on digital boards. The air was thick with anticipation. When Avery stepped into the room, every conversation stopped. Even Captain Reynolds, the base commander, stood and saluted. "Lieutenant Commander Blake," he said with solemn respect. "They've been briefed on protocol, but I told them to wait for your word." Avery returned the salute. "Thank you, sir." She stepped forward and faced the room, 16 men and women, all high-performing candidates vying for positions in SEAL Team 9, all expecting some grizzled, broad-shouldered officer to walk in and take charge. Instead, they got her. She scanned their faces, and sure enough, there they were, Jake, Logan, Ty, and Matt. The same men who had mocked her just minutes earlier in the showers. Their eyes widened in disbelief, mouths slightly ajar. Jake shifted in his seat, suddenly unsure how to sit. Logan's cocky smirk had vanished. Ty stared at the floor like it might swallow him whole. Avery didn't give them the satisfaction of a grin or even a glare. She just opened her folder and began, her voice steady and sharp. "This is Operation Black Ember. It's a joint force simulation based on real-world extraction missions from high-conflict zones. You'll be working in squads of 4. Each squad will encounter terrain-based threats, precision challenges, and leave combat simulations. The team with the highest operational score will earn placement priority for SEAL Team 9. She paused. "I will personally lead Alpha Squad." That statement dropped like a grenade. No one dared breathe too loudly. "Questions?" she asked. Matt hesitated, then raised a hand. "Hey, ma'am, may I ask?" How long have you been with SEALs? She raised an eyebrow, but nodded. 8 years, 5 deployments, 3 successful hostage recoveries, 2 years as mission planner for Joint Task Force Ironclad. I've bled with the best of them, and I've buried friends most of you wouldn't have had the courage to follow. She closed her folder with finality. Any more questions? None came. Reynolds gave her a respectful nod. All yours, Commander. She dismissed the room, one squad at a time, saving Alpha for last. Her eyes landed on the 4 who had once laughed at her towel-clad figure, now looking like schoolboys who got caught cheating on a final exam. Alpha Squad, she said, you stay. The others filed out. The door hissed shut behind them. Avery took a step closer, voice low but fierce. I know what you said, I know how you laughed, and I didn't stop you not because I was weak, but because I wanted you to show me exactly who you are. Jake tried to speak, but she raised a hand. Save it, because out there, when you're cold, wet, and bullets are flying, no one's gonna care how loud you were in the showers. What will matter is whether you can follow orders, keep your team alive, and respect the chain of command. She leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on Logan. And right now, I am that chain. Logan swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Good, she said, straightening. Then suit up. We leave in 10. You're going to learn a lot today about leadership, discipline, and what it really means to earn your place. She turned to the door, not waiting for a response. The moment she left, silence lingered for just a breath before Matt finally whispered, We just got owned. Jake nodded slowly. No, we just met a real SEAL. The sun had barely cracked the horizon when the teams assembled on the frozen dirt just outside the facility's perimeter. Breath puffed from their mouths like smoke. The wind bit through uniforms, but no one dared complain, not with Commander Avery Blake pacing in front of them, like a storm contained in human form. This isn't a game, she said, her voice slicing through the cold. This simulation is based on a real mission, one I led 3 years ago in Kandahar. We lost a man on that one because someone thought they didn't have to follow orders. Her gaze swept over Alpha Squad. They didn't blink. Today's objective is simple: extract the wounded asset from hostile territory and bring him home alive. You'll face physical obstacles, endurance trials, tactical puzzles, and live-fire accuracy drills. If you fall behind, you get left behind. Then she pointed at Logan. You're the injured operative. You don't walk. You don't speak unless spoken to. You trust your team. He nodded reluctantly. Jake, Ty, and Matt exchanged glances. They'd seen training like this before, but never with her. The tension wasn't just from the challenge ahead. It was from the memory of yesterday. The way they'd laughed. The way she hadn't responded, until the truth crushed them like a freight train. Alpha Squad, Avery said, stepping back. You're up first. The timer started. Jake took the lead, navigating the terrain. Ty and Matt hoisted Logan onto a makeshift stretcher made from steel piping and tactical webbing. The first half-mile was flat, but the obstacle course ahead loomed like a battlefield. Barbed wire, water pits, 20-foot walls, rope climbs, and sniper towers. This wasn't just designed to test muscle. It tested mind, spirit, and trust. They started strong. But walls don't care about confidence, and rivers don't care about pride. By the halfway point, their movement slowed. Logan's weight was dragging them down. Coordination slipped. Jake barked commands, but there was no rhythm, no teamwork. Until they reached the tunnel. A narrow shaft, just wide enough to crawl through with a body on your back. Pitch dark, cold, claustrophobic. A stream of icy water flowed through the bottom. The rules were clear if you dropped your asset. Your mission was failed. They hesitated. Then a voice came from the darkness. Switch out, Avery said. She had been following, silent, unseen until now. Jake turned. Commander, we've got this. You don't, she said simply. You're 12 minutes behind pace. You've already failed the timing threshold. He opened his mouth to argue, but then saw her eyes flat, unreadable. The eyes of someone who had watched men die and never once blinked. Move aside, Without a sound, she lifted Logan one arm under his knees, one across his back, and ducked into the tunnel alone. The squad watched in stunned silence as she disappeared into darkness. For 10 seconds, there was nothing. Then a soft splash. Then silence again. Then her voice, "Are you coming or not?" They scrambled to follow. Inside the tunnel, Avery moved like a ghost. No panic, no struggle. She shifted Logan's weight expertly, inching through the freezing crawl space as if she were taking a walk through her living room. When they finally emerged on the other side, Logan looked dazed. "She carried me like I was nothing," he whispered, like it was just instinct. Avery dropped him gently and stood. Water dripped from her sleeves. Mud streaked her face. Her voice, when she spoke, wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like thunder. "You think respect is earned by shouting louder than the next guy," she said, "or by pushing someone around in a locker room." She looked at each of them in turn. "You earn it here, in the dirt, in the blood. When no one's looking, when your lungs are screaming and your muscles are failing, and you still carry your brother to safety." Ty looked down, ashamed. Matt wiped sweat from his brow, unable to meet her eyes. Jake finally spoke. "Why are you here, Commander? Why train with us? You've already proven yourself." Avery paused, then took a long breath. "Because the day I stop proving myself is the day I stop leading." The words hung in the air, heavy, true. And for the first time since they arrived at Camp Iron Ridge, Alpha Squad didn't just see her as a woman, or even just a commander. They saw her as the standard. The base cafeteria was quieter than usual that night. Plates clinked, boots thudded, but conversation muted. Every head subtly turned when Commander Avery Blake entered, tray in hand, uniform still damp from the simulation. She looked exactly like them, mud-stained, hair tied back, exhaustion on her face. But no one could forget what they had seen that day. She didn't sit with the officers. She never did. Instead, she walked to an empty table near the back corner, the same place she always sat, like she was still trying to disappear. Except tonight, they wouldn't let her. Jake stood first. It was awkward, like watching someone rip pride from their own chest. But he picked up his tray and walked over. He said nothing, just sat across from her. Then came Ty, then Matt, then Logan, limping slightly, but walking without help. The four of them sat around Avery like rookies shadowing a general. It wasn't a command. It was instinct. Avery didn't look up. She just took another bite of her mashed potatoes and let the silence speak for itself. "You were right," Jake finally said. She looked up. "We weren't ready. Not for this. Not for you." She said nothing. "You could have humiliated us out there. You had every reason to," Ty added. "Instead, you carried one of us through a tunnel, risked your time, your place." Avery's fork paused midair. "I didn't do it for your respect." Logan blinked. Then, "Why?" "Because that's what leaders do," she said simply. "And because someday, when it's not simulation but real bullets, real blood, you'll need to do the same for someone else." Matt exhaled, then leaned forward. "We were wrong about you. Completely." Avery smiled faintly. "You weren't wrong. You just didn't know." Jake leaned in. "So help us know. Who are you, really?" For a moment, it felt like she might dodge the question again. She'd been tight-lipped since she arrived. Her file had been sealed. Rumors swirled, but no one really knew. Then she spoke softly, but firmly. "I enlisted when I was 19. Infantry, did my time, got promoted, recruited into Black Ops after surviving an ambush in Fallujah, spent 3 years in missions that don't officially exist, in places most of the world pretends are peaceful. I've held brothers dying in my arms, and I've seen civilians beg for their lives while bombs dropped outside their windows." She looked at each of them. "I didn't come here to impress you. I came here to rebuild a team from the ground up. SEAL Team 9 lost its commander 6 months ago. I was given the choice: take the title, or earn it again from scratch. I chose the hard way." Jake's voice cracked. "Why?" She leaned back. "Because I've led from behind a desk. I've made decisions that sent men into firefights I couldn't be there for. and I swore I'd never do it again unless I could look my team in the eye and know they trusted me with their lives. The cafeteria felt smaller now, quieter. The weight of her words settled on their shoulders like combat packs. "We do trust you," Ty said softly. Avery nodded once. "You will, one day, when we're out there, and you have to choose between comfort and courage, between saving yourself or carrying someone else." She stood and gathered her tray. The others followed suit without a word, not because they had to, because it felt right. As she walked past the other tables, the murmurs stopped again. But this time, there was no mockery, no laughter, only respect. Some saluted, some nodded, and some those who had once laughed the loudest stood silently, eyes down, as if seeing her for the first time. Because everything had changed now. She wasn't the quiet girl in the towel anymore. She was Commander Avery Blake, and they had finally learned what leadership looked like, not in muscle or bravado, but in sacrifice, silence, and unshakable strength. 2 days after the tunnel exercise, everything changed. The routine training cycle was interrupted by an unscheduled base-wide alert. Klaxons screamed across Camp Iron Ridge. Red lights pulsed. All active units were called to the central briefing room immediately. Commander Avery Blake was already there. This time, she wasn't in fatigues. She wore full tactical gear body armor, headset, sidearm holstered at her hip. The look in her eyes wasn't instructional. It was operational. And it chilled the room. "Attention," barked Captain Reynolds as the trainees assembled. "We've received credible intel regarding a high-value extraction scenario just outside U.S. territory. Classified location, limited response window. We're sending one team and only one." Avery stepped forward. "This is not a drill." She let the words hang. "Our mission is to retrieve a former Navy intelligence officer who disappeared 3 weeks ago. Satellite imagery suggests he's alive, but injured, held in a rogue paramilitary camp." Murmurs rippled across the room. Jake leaned toward Ty. "They're actually pulling us into a live op." Avery continued. "This is what you've trained for? The mission will simulate a night drop insertion, terrain nav, and high-threat recon, but the risks are real, live ammo, real consequences." Then she dropped the bomb. "I'm selecting one squad to accompany me." Heads turned, some held breath, others clenched fists. Avery scanned the room slowly. "And I'm choosing Alpha Squad." Silence. Jake blinked. "Us." Ty's jaw tightened. Matt whispered, "Holy hell." Logan, still sore from the last training mission, stood straighter. "Report to Gear Bay 4 in 30 minutes. You'll receive full kits and final briefing en route." She stepped off the platform, not waiting for thanks or reactions. Her pace was purposeful, controlled, commanding. Jake caught up to her in the hallway. "Commander," he said, almost breathless. "Why us? We messed up. You saw it." She didn't break stride. "You learned." He blinked. "But we're not ready for this." She stopped. "You're more ready than you think. You failed. You owned it. Then you got back up. That's all combat is." Jake had no answer. Inside gear. Bay 4, the air buzzed with nervous energy. Weapons checked, radios tested, packs tightened. No one cracked jokes this time. No one rolled their eyes. They watched her now. Closely. With respect, with purpose, with trust. Avery took them through the insertion map. Her voice was low, precise. She made eye contact with each of them, her words more than briefing, they were a bond. "We drop here," she pointed, 6 clicks northeast of the compound. "We'll travel light and fast. No room for hesitation, no room for ego." She paused. "If anyone's unsure, speak now." No one did. "Then let's bring our man home." The aircraft hummed over enemy terrain, its interior red-lit and vibrating with tension. Avery sat across from Alpha Squad, face unreadable. Her hand rested lightly on the grip of her rifle. She looked calm, but behind those eyes was a woman scanning every possible outcome, every risk, every escape route. Jake leaned forward slightly. "Commander, why do this... Why lead from the front? Avery looked at him. Because if I expect you to walk into fire, I'd better be the first one through it. They nodded. Not because they had to, but because they believed her now, believed in her. And when the red light above the hatch turned green and the ramp lowered to a pitch-black desert, it wasn't just Commander Blake who charged into the night. It was their commander. The desert was a silent beast pitch black, breathless and endless. Winds swept over jagged rocks and bone-dry earth as Alpha Squad moved in tight formation, following Commander Avery Blake through the sand like shadows clinging to a flame. Every movement mattered. Every step was deliberate. Avery's voice came through the comms low, calm, and firm. Scan left. Ty, adjust your spacing. Logan, keep your breathing under control. You're dragging air. Even in total darkness, they could feel her presence, not just ahead of them, but with them. She wasn't barking orders from a distance. She was leading with her boots in the dirt, her weapon drawn, her instincts razor sharp. They crested a dune, and Avery motioned for the squad to drop. Up ahead, nestled in a broken canyon, was the encampment tents, towers, heat signatures. A single infrared blip pulsed faintly in the far corner. "Target's alive," she whispered, heartbeat steady, no restraints, likely guarded, not bound. Jake blinked in the dark. "How the hell can she tell that from here?" Matt whispered. "You forget who she is." They didn't forget anymore. Avery mapped out the assault in seconds. She split the team into two. Logan and Ty would cut power at the junction box, while Jake and Matt followed her in to retrieve the asset. No wasted words, no theatrics, just trust. When the clock struck 0, everything exploded into motion. Logan sprinted low under barbed wire, Ty hot on his heels. Sparks flew power down. Avery didn't wait for confirmation. Move. She breached first, silenced pistol raised, sweeping the entrance like she'd done it 1,000 times because she had. Jake followed, heart pounding but hands steady. He didn't question anymore. He knew she would never lead them anywhere she wasn't willing to die first. They found the prisoner bloodied but conscious. Avery reached him, checked for wounds, and lifted him without hesitation. "Extraction path." "Bravo," she said into the mic. "Ty, lead us out. Logan, cover rear." They ran, not fast, but precise, controlled, like they had become something more. Then came the shout, the crack of gunfire. A guard had spotted them. Bullets lit up the night, ripping through silence like thunder. Matt took cover. Jake returned fire. Logan dropped to one knee and clipped the shooter with a clean shot. But then another round tore through the darkness, this one grazing Avery's arm. She stumbled, just a half step, blood darkening her sleeve. But she never dropped the prisoner, never stopped moving. Ty was at her side instantly. "Commander!" "I'm good. Keep moving." She didn't even look back. They pushed through the canyon under fire, and not once did any of them think about rank or gender or pride. They thought about the woman bleeding beside them who refused to drop a brother. They thought about the commander who had once been mocked in a shower, now carrying lives on her back without hesitation. When the evac chopper touched down, rotor blades slicing the air, it felt like redemption. They loaded the prisoner. Avery climbed in last, still holding her bleeding arm, eyes scanning the horizon like a hawk. Inside the cabin, no one spoke. They just looked at her. At the pain she didn't complain about. At the mission she never questioned. At the standard she refused to lower. Jake leaned forward, voice barely audible over the rotors. "You're the realest soldier I've ever seen." Avery met his eyes, then be won too. He nodded, jaw tight with emotion. No one would ever mock her again. And if anyone did, they'd have to go through Alpha Squad first. The sun was rising when the helicopter touched down at Camp Iron Ridge. Alpha Squad disembarked in silence, uniforms stained with sweat, dust, and blood, not all of it their own. They didn't walk like the same men who had once joked in the showers. Their boots hit the ground with purpose now, shoulders squared, heads held higher. But eyes those had changed most of all. They weren't just looking forward, they were looking to her. Commander Avery Blake stepped off last, her arm freshly bandaged, face unreadable as always, but there was a weight to her that hadn't been there before. She wasn't just their superior now, she was their leader, the kind you'd follow into the fire without question. As they approached the debriefing room, the base's personnel stood still, watching. Word had traveled fast. There were whispers, salutes, but mostly, there was something no one had expected just a few days ago. Respect. Not the kind written in ranks or earned from medals. The kind carved in the trenches, stitched into wounds, and carried on the backs of those who never asked to be heroes, but became them anyway. Inside the briefing room, Captain Reynolds stood, arms crossed, eyes scanning the team. "You brought him home," he said. Avery gave a simple nod. Alive. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "That operation was meant for Tier 1 clearance. You weren't expected to engage, just observe." Avery didn't flinch. Observation doesn't bring people home. Reynolds studied her, then nodded once. Dismissed. As the team filed out, Avery started toward her quarters, but stopped when she heard footsteps behind her. It was Jake. He stood there awkwardly, something clenched in his fist. "Commander," he said, "got something for you." He opened his hand. It was a small black patch, their team insignia. "We talked, the squad, we want you to wear it, not because you trained with us, but because you led us." She looked at the patch, then at him. "Jake, I was assigned to lead." "Yeah," he said, "but that doesn't mean you had to care." She took the patch, quietly. Ty, Matt, and Logan appeared behind him, each offering a silent nod. "Besides," Logan added, "I owe you a shoulder ride after that tunnel." Avery chuckled just once, a small, real laugh that took even her by surprise. "I'll collect on that," she said, during burpee drills. Groans echoed down the hallway, but they followed her anyway. That night, Avery stood outside the training facility alone, staring at the horizon. The desert stars were wide and merciless above her, cold, eternal, just like the world she'd trained in, just like the world she'd survived. But now, it felt different. Footsteps crunched behind her. She didn't turn. "Can't sleep either?" Jake asked. "I sleep fine," she replied. "I just don't need as much." He stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes on the stars. "You know, we used to think being a SEAL meant being the toughest guy in the room." And now she asked. Jake took a long breath. "Now, we know it means being the one who carries the others when they can't stand. The one who bleeds first, so others don't have to." Avery said nothing. "You taught us that." Still silence. "But you also taught us something else," he added. She turned slightly. "That leadership doesn't shout. It whispers. It shows up. It listens. It lifts." Her eyes softened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "What's that?" she asked. "My letter of recommendation," he said, "for advanced field leadership. Thought I'd earned it before. Now I understand it." She took the paper, folded it again, and handed it back. "You don't need that yet," she said. "What you need is to keep walking, keep failing, keep rising." He nodded, then turned to go. She watched him disappear into the darkness. The woman they mocked in a towel. She'd become something they could never mock again, because she wasn't just their commander. She was the reason they would one day survive. Never underestimate someone based on what they look like, where they come from, or how quietly they carry themselves. Commander Avery Blake walked into a world that judged her before she ever spoke a word. They mocked her in the showers, laughed at her silence, questioned her strength, but real strength doesn't always raise its voice. Real leadership doesn't demand attention, it earns it. The lesson here is powerful and universal. Respect is not owed to the loudest in the room. It belongs to those who carry others when no one else will. Look deeper, listen more, and never assume the story based on the cover, because the woman you mock today might be the one who saves you tomorrow. If this story inspired you, subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss what's next. Thanks for watching.